Do you feel like you're just bad at doing exams? Have you ever walked into an exam before, felt like you were going to smash it, yet when you got your results back, you're like, what the hell happened here? How did I do so bad? Or maybe you've been doing so much hard work, you've been studying hard, you've been doing all these things, but your results just don't reflect that. Well, if any of these happen to you, then you're most likely studying completely wrong. And look, to be honest with you, I don't blame you at all, because the truth is our own schools do not teach us how to study. They'll teach us what to study. Then we get tutors to further teach us what to study, but where's the how? So in this video, I'm going to be telling you how to study effectively and get the ATAR that you want. It is these study methods. It is this video that I'm creating that allowed me to score a 97 plus ATAR, become DUX, get scholarship, and get a band 6, which is 90 out of 100% in all my exams. So hopefully that's enough convincing that what I'm going to say in this video does work, but I just want to quickly warn you or remind you of something. If you just watch this video for entertainment and then go back to doing the same thing that you always do, then you've wasted your time. Try these methods, apply these methods, and I promise you that you will do well. How can I promise it? Because not only is it proven for me, but it's also evidence-based, meaning there is a science behind these techniques and what I'm about to tell you that proves that they're effective. Okay, but don't just watch this video and not apply it. Go back to doing what you always do, because otherwise you're not going to ever improve. Change is required for improvement. Anyway, let's get on with it. Make sure you focus and have some notes ready, because this video is going to change the way you study. Hey guys, just quickly before we continue watching this amazing video, I want to talk to you about this drink called Magic Mind. Now, I am a coffee drinker and I have a lot of coffee, but the problem with coffee is that I have a massive caffeine crash at the end of the day, and it causes me to be so anxious. This is where Magic Mind comes in. After just a couple of weeks of having this drink, I have an increased focus, increased attention span, more clarity, and the best part of all, I literally have no more crashes and my anxiety levels have reduced. Now, how does this work? Magic Mind has a whole heap of nootropics, such as L-theanine, which is a natural caffeine releaser. The thing is, right, caffeine doesn't actually give you energy, and you can do your own research here. It just blocks you from being tired, whereas L-theanine actually gives you energy. Guys, I'd highly recommend you get this drink. I'm not sponsored by them, but you can use a link in the description down below for 20% off. And also, there's a 60-day money-back guarantee, so if you don't enjoy it, you can just refund your money. There are two ways that you can study. The first way is passive study. Passive studying is where you just put information into your brain and it requires no effort. And this is how the majority of students study, and this is why the majority of students do bad in their exams. Now, what are some examples of passive studying? An example would be writing notes or highlighting or rereading, right? All of these methods, I'm 100% confident that you watching this right now is how you mainly study if you're not doing well, right? Because like I said, this is what our school teaches us. Make sure you take some good notes. Make sure you read your notes, all this stuff. Now, this technique is not effective, and I'll get to that in a second. But the second way of studying is active studying, which involves taking information out of your brain, right? It's active and it requires effort, meaning you're actually engaging and using your brain. An example of this would be doing practice questions. What is the definition of this? What's the process? You have to think about it, then tell me. Whereas if I told you to just, write this off the board, that's passive. You're just looking at it and just transcribing whatever's on the board, right? So that's why it's called active and passive study. Now that we've gone over the two ways of studying, I want to talk about the best study methods. Now, there are multiple methods to studying, and it all depends on what best fits you. And I will be making videos further on, studying and my studying methods and tips. But in this video, I just want to give you my personal opinion of the top 3 study techniques. If you were to follow right now after this video, your grades will go from 0 to hero. Trust me, it worked for me, and hopefully will work for you too, but you need to apply it. So, the first best study technique is spaced repetition. Okay, so I'm at my computer here. Sorry for the drop of quality. I'm just using my computer mic, not my actual microphone for the camera, but it doesn't matter because the point is still going to be made. This is what you call the forgetting curve. Now, this forgetting curve is why you forget everything and why you walk into an exam feeling like you're going to do well, but then do bad. Okay, guys and girls, this forgetting curve concept literally changed my life, and it changed the way I studied. So please pay attention here. So here we have something called the forgetting curve, right? As you can see, we have the x-axis here, and we have the y-axis, so the days and the retention, okay? Now, Our memory starts strong. So when we first learn something, we understand it and we can recall it easily. Let's say, for example, your teacher said something on a slide. You're like, yep, you're nodding your head. Yes, I understand. At that moment, your memory's at 100%. You know everything. It's the same when you take your notes. When you're there looking at your textbook and you're taking your notes, at that moment, you know everything. You have 100% memory, okay? But look what happens over just a couple of days. Over a couple of days, you have forgotten a huge chunk of that information. Look, you go from 100% to around 60, below 60%. The numbers are arbitrary. The point is that your memory has been declined a huge amount. And guess what happens? More days go by where you haven't even revised the concept that you first learned and you've pretty much forgotten. This is one of the main reasons why students do bad in their exams, apart from the reason of just studying passively. Okay, this is one of the biggest reasons why this will happen. You first learn the content well, and this might happen to you. I'm pretty confident it does. You might first learn the content well, right? You understand everything. Your teacher has explained it well, taken your good looking pretty notes, and at that point in time, you know everything. But what happens is you don't revise that concept again. You just think that you know it already because when you first learned it, you did know it, okay? So you don't revise that concept again, and then because of that, your memory is starting to decline without you even knowing. This is the scariest part about this whole concept. The fact that you don't even know what's happening. You are unaware of the fact that you're forgetting everything. You think you know everything because at that first moment of learning it, you did know everything. So now you've tricked yourself, oh, I don't need to revise it, I know everything. And when I say you don't revise that concept again, it can be as simple as doing practice questions or even though it's very ineffective, reading of your notes. Just the bare minimum reading of your notes. If you don't do any of these, this will happen, right? You're not revising that knowledge again. And now, the more we go, the more your memory decreases as time passes by. You haven't revised any of the content. You get your exam notification, your exam's in a week, 2 weeks, and because your memory is literally below like 20%, you think that you don't need to revise again because you first revised, a couple of weeks back. There's a placebo effect where you think you're going to do well. You think you know everything, but you really don't, as this graph explains beautifully. How do you beat the forgetting curve? Spaced repetition. Spaced repetition is where you, after first learning the topic, you review that information over multiple times, okay? So let's say, for example, you've taken your notes from a textbook. Instead of revising it a day and then not touching it again. It's just about reviewing it the next day, the next couple of days. Now look what happens. This is crazy. I want your jaw to drop right now when I tell you this is life-changing. Look at the graph that I just had. Look, this was the previous graph. This is how the graph looked before. Look at that same graph. Look what happens when we apply spaced repetition. Isn't this amazing? Is your jaw dropped? Please let me know down in the comments. When you first learn the topic, when it's at 100%, as your memory declines, if you revise that concept again the next day, it jumps back to 100%. And now look what happens. Because you revise that concept, if you revise that concept again in the next 2 days, it jumps back to 100%. And then, as you can see, the gaps get longer between each review, right? Now we have 1, 2, 3 days, and it jumps up again. And now the next review is going to be even longer. Now, please tell me, what's the logical conclusion of this? The logic behind this is that if you were to just apply this spaced repetition technique, by the time you get to your exam, you are going to know everything, going to remember everything. Surely, like I said, these numbers are arbitrary. Maybe you don't know everything, but you only need to revise a couple of things that are not even important anyway. This is what allowed me, by the time I got to my exam, everyone was learning and relearning the topics they had from term 1. I was chilling. I was doing practice questions. I was doing the more high yield techniques like, active recall and most importantly, practice questions. Everyone else was revising the topics and only gave themselves a couple of days to do practice, while I knew everything. This technique is so bloody powerful that I could remember the last 2 terms of content in like term 3. No joke. That's how powerful this technique is. The second best study technique is active recall. This involves actively recalling information from memory rather than passively reviewing or rereading the content. Now, this technique is hard and uncomfortable, and this is why the majority of students don't do it. The amount of students I've said to apply these techniques, they apply it for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then they don't apply it anymore. Why? They be honest with me too. It's just that it's hard. It feels uncomfortable and it goes outside the norms of what we're usually taught, which is to take notes and read notes. But active recall is like amazing. It increases your memory. It takes information that's in your short-term memory and puts it in your long-term memory so that you can remember it for longer. Please understand that if your study is hard, it is better because it means you're actually doing something. There's a saying that I always try to remember and I always tell my students, the harder your revision is, the easier your exam is. That's why I'd assume when you walked into your exam exam and you felt like you were going to do well and you didn't do well, I'm guessing that your revision was easy. You just took notes, you read your notes, you highlighted, and that's why your exam was hard. Does that make sense? Okay, so how do you apply active recall? How would I use that? Well, there are multiple ways of using active recall, and I might make a separate video on this, it depends. But I'll tell you the top 3 ways. Number 1 is to test yourself through your own active recall questions. An example of this would be, let's say you've just read in your notes, or let's say you get a textbook out, whatever it is, you can then make questions based off the content. So for example, let's say there's a process that you need to know. Instead of just reading the process, write the question of outline the process of this, and then you're gonna hide the answer. Then when you look at the question, you need to try to recall what that answer is from memory, and then based off of how you do, you then review that question using spaced repetition. Another way of doing active recall is the Feynman technique. What this is it's just explaining the topic like you're talking to someone, right? So let me give you an example. Let's say you're sitting down and you look at your notes. What you want to do is you want to cover your notes, look at, the wall or something, and just pretend like you're teaching a class, pretend like you're teaching a student, and make sure when you're teaching this, your student, your invisible student, or you could actually use a real person. I personally just spoke to the wall. Have to act like that person is a 5-year-old, meaning you have to explain it like you're explaining to a 5-year-old, meaning you're not gonna jump in and use all these special terms. You're gonna break it down and then put it all together to explain everything. And if you can do this, then that means you truly remember and understand the content. And the final way you can apply active recall is simply by summarizing your notes from memory. Summarizing your notes, just looking at your notes, is very ineffective. You want to use it from memory, right? So you close your notes and just summarize everything from memory, and that's another way you can apply active recall. There are multiple others, but I would say those are the top 3. The third best study method that is so underrated yet extremely effective is mind mapping. Mind mapping involves visualizing how different topics relate to each other and the connection between them. Here is an example of one of my mind maps for biology in year 11. Now that I've gone over the 3 of the best study methods, I want to talk about the best study method overall. Okay, those 3 that I just spoke about are more for like when you're first learning a topic, or it's more for deepening your understanding and remembering everything. But do you want to know what best study method is? Like undoubtedly, I don't care what anyone says, this is the best way to study for your year 11 and year 12 to get the ATAR you want. Do you know what it is? Practice questions. I know you maybe have heard it before, your teachers say it, but the truth is no one gives justice to practice questions. What they do instead is they take their notes, they reread them, they highlight them, they do all these things, and then they leave questions to like the last couple of days. But you want to do the opposite. You want to be doing a bunch of practice questions. Why? Because studying is just like boxing. How is studying like boxing? Well, if you were to prepare for a boxing match, how would you prepare for it? Would you sit down, watch some videos on how to box, take some notes on how to be a good boxer and their characteristics and how to punch and how to do this? Or would you actually go out there, use the boxing bag, spar, and actually physically train? Exactly right, you would do that. So how come when it comes to studying, all you're doing is taking your notes, you're highlighting, and you're watching videos? It's literally exactly like boxing. You need to be doing more practice questions, because doing practice questions for an exam is the equivalent of sparring someone in a boxing match to prepare for it. That's how you do better, and that's how you win. So make sure you're doing more practice questions. Don't leave it to a couple of days. Do it as early as you possibly can. You don't need to be fully confident with the information too. Now, I have a whole ebook on how to effectively do past paper exams or practice questions, whatever you want to call it. I have that linked in the description down below. It's completely free and it's very short. It's like 30 pages, right? Make sure you read that after this video, because it will help you really use your past papers and practice questions effectively. And I'd say it's extremely urgent to read right now, because I think you're on holidays right now. So it's good to know how to do this stuff before you go back to the new term. Now, finally, I want to talk about notes versus no notes. This is a big debate. Should I take notes, should I not take notes? Now, let me set it straight. Overall, it's dependent on you, what you want to do. There are some subjects where I didn't take notes because, the techniques that I just talked about, active recall, spaced repetition, mind map, that was enough for me. Like, I don't need to take any notes. Maybe sometimes I use other people's notes, but most of the time I just used a textbook or online sources. However, there were some subjects that I did take notes. So the answer is like, it completely depends on you. In my opinion, I'd say take notes, especially because by taking notes, it allows you to make sure that you address all the content. So when you do active recall, when you do spaced repetition, when you do mind mapping, you're actually addressing all the topics you need to know. And you might be thinking, well, didn't you just say that notes are bad and that's passive studying? Yes, but they're only bad if you do them bad. The way I want you to use notes, and the reason why people use them so wrong, and the reason why it's so ineffective, is because people's mindset of note taking is flawed. What people think when they take notes is that this is my second brain. You know, I'm gonna use this. If I haven't written it down, I don't know it. You know, they are so dependent on their notes, and all they do is once they've taken the notes, they just read it, highlight it, you know, rewrite it. This is why it's ineffective. But the way you can use notes effectively is that once you've written your notes, right, you want to use the methods I just talked about, okay? There's nothing wrong with writing notes as long as you've just applied what I said. So once you've taken your notes, make active recall questions from them. Once you've taken your notes, make a mind map from it, from memory, right? Once you've taken your notes, make sure you're actually actively using those notes to remember everything on those notes. And there you have it. That is how you study in a short video like this. There is much more to talk about, but to be honest with you, what I've just told you will allow you to boost your grades like crazy if you actually apply it. So what your job is to do right now after watching this video is to, number one, read that ebook that I've just talked about. It's only 30 pages long. And number two is to actually apply what I've said. And if you do that, you will see an improvement. Thank you so much for watching this video. And if you enjoyed it, please be sure to support the channel by liking, subscribing to my channel, and also commenting down below if you have any questions. And also be sure to join my weekly newsletter, ATAR Digest, where each week I will send you a 5-minute email containing key lessons, 95 plus ATAR guidance and advice, motivation, inspiration, and so much more. Here is what students have to say about it. It's completely for free, and I promise you won't regret it. I will see you in the next video.